Well, here we are again in our journey through Ephesians. We're going to pick up in chapter 3. And we started last week. Paul is entering into a prayer. He's praying for the whole family of God, those that are already in heaven, those that are on earth, depicting us as those that carry the name or the character of our Father, of our God. We manifest it to various degrees. So now he's going to get to the request part. I'm actually going to read you the whole thing again to give you a flow. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth derives its name. Here's the request, verse 16. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being. Verse 17. Why? Why does he want us to be strengthened by the power of the Spirit in our inner being? Verse 17. So that Christ may dwell. That word dwell there is a Greek word oikodomeo. It means to be at home in. So that Christ may dwell or be at home in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the saints. That word saints just means those that are separated because of our trust in Christ and because of becoming his followers. Doesn't mean that we're perfect or we've done miracles. Everyone that puts trust in Christ in the New Testament is called a saint, one that is set apart unto God. May have power together with all the saints to grasp how wide, how long, how deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge. Now there's a play on words there. To know is the Greek word gnosko. It means to know by experience this love that passes knowledge, oida, which means just fact-based knowledge. So Paul is praying that we will experience this love of God that is so vast and beyond mental comprehension, but can be experienced. So he's praying that we'll experience what we can't quite cognitively put together, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled, and this is really important, filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. What is that saying? So it's a big prayer request here. So I'm going to try to briefly pick it apart for you. First part, verse 17. The first part of the prayer request, that the Spirit of God will strengthen us inwardly, our spirits, so that we will have the capacity to be aware of the presence of Christ as an ongoing reality. Now, this awareness of the presence of Christ, it's trust-based or faith-based, but Paul's praying that the Spirit of God will do something to our reasoning abilities and our imaginations and our conscience, that as they fuse and work together, they'll be strengthened and they'll make us more every day aware of the presence of Christ in our life. The result of that, verse 18, the result is that we may have the power together with all the saints to grasp how wide, how long, how high, and how deep is the love of Christ. So as we become aware as a normative thing of daily life, the presence of Christ, he's at home in our hearts, we're going to be getting more and more experienced in the love of Christ. In other words, we're going to see the way he sees things. We're going to start feeling more the way he feels about things. We're going to see people in the light of his sacrificial love on the cross. We're going to be reminded again and again of his sacrificial love for us, and this starts to change us. We start to become beings that are immersed in an inner culture of love, regardless of the exterior hostility or lack thereof in our society. So then he goes on to say, in verse 19, and to know, so the presence of Christ becomes a normative thing that we're aware of. We're more and more becoming experienced in his love. Verse 19, and to know this love, and here again, this gnosko, to experientially know this love that surpasses knowledge, cognitive, oida knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. So that's the ultimate end of the prayer, that we will experience expansively, increasingly, the love of Christ. We can't quite cognitively get our heads around it. It's so vast, it's so deep, but we can experience it more and more. And he says, and as we experience it more and more, we will have the fullness of God in us. What does that mean? Simply stated as this, that we will experience life inside the way God does. I don't know if you've ever given this much thought, but contemplating to some degree the way God must feel. I mean, here he is. He is totally good. His will is pure. He's utterly unselfish. He is sacrificially loving. He is almighty and invulnerable, and yet the most gentle, safe being in the universe. He is always kind. He is always honest. And we could go on and on. So the result of being that kind of a being, you are filled with a different quality of life. Think about this. If we lie or we do something shady, or if we're unkind, or if we're mean, or if we're greedy, how do we feel inside? Well, we might be a little numb, but in most cases, we don't feel good. And you can't feel good no matter how good your circumstances are if we're living counter to the laws of our being. But when we're kind, we feel better about ourselves inside, or when we're generous, or when we're loving, or when we're compassionate, or courageous for the right reasons, and all these kinds of things. So he's praying that we'll be so immersed with an awareness of the presence of Christ and his love that we will start to experience life like God himself experiences it. Our capacity for joy will be expanded. Our capacity to love, our capacity for kindness, for patience, for gentleness, for goodness, all these things will be expanded. And when they expand, we start knowing the way it feels to live like God lives. One of God's great goals in this life is for us to learn to live like God himself lives and to love like God himself loves. And when we do, that is the zenith, that is the height, that is the maximum experience of joy that an image-bearing being can possibly experience. Okay, it's a big prayer, and it doesn't even there. We'll pick it up tomorrow.